We have a saying. We have a few different types of bears. We have brown bears, black bears, grizzly bears.
Yeah.
They say if it's brown, lie down.
Okay.
If it's black, fight back. And if it's a grizzly bear, well, good luck.
Welcome to English with Lewis. Let's go!
Hello, everybody, and welcome back once again to English with Lewis and another natural, authentic interview with a native speaker from, this time, Canada. Hey, Michael.
Hi, Lewis. How are you doing?
I'm not bad. Like I was saying, I was just complaining about being tired, but I think I like to complain. I think we all like to complain, whether it's about the weather, sleeping badly, having a lot of work. It's natural to just like to get things off your chest. You know what I
Yes, to
mean?
get things off your chest, to let off steam, you could say.
Okay, perfect. We're less than a minute in, and we've already gone over two fantastic expressions to let off steam and to get things off your chest. But let's get to the point. And Michael, could you introduce yourself? Tell everybody about you.
Well, thank you for having me, Lewis. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Michael Anton. I'm the founder of English at the Ready. I teach English on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok, on Facebook, just like Lewis. So I'm from Canada. I started teaching English about 3 to 4 years ago, and I started posting on TikTok originally in 2022. I got a few followers on TikTok, and things kind of snowballed. That's another idiom. One thing led to another, and here I am. I have quite a few followers on Instagram, quite a few on TikTok, and I'm also active on YouTube too.
Fantastic. So English at the ready. Where did this name come from?
You know, I can't remember, to be honest. I think what I did, I sat down one night and I just came up with a list of 15 or 20 different names. And it's actually hard to find a good name
Uh-huh. Yeah.
because I'm not the only one doing this. Lots of people teach English online. There are already lots of teachers. And, when you think you have a good name, you check, somebody's already taken it. So I chose English at the ready. I think it's fitting. At the ready is an idiom, basically means something that's available, something that's ready to use. And I like to think that my lessons are available, they're ready to use, they're ready to learn from. So that's kind of how the name English at the Ready came to be. It was a pretty random decision, but
Yeah,
it
there's no
stuck.
going back now. What's done is done.
Exactly, exactly. Even if I wanted to change it, I think that would be very difficult, but I'm pretty satisfied with it, so I don't see any reason for that.
Excellent, wonderful. And you said you're from Canada. Whereabouts in Canada?
So I was born in Vancouver. Have you ever been to Vancouver?
Unfortunately, I haven't. I've never been to Canada. I've been to the United States, but I've never been to Canada. And it's a place that I really would love to visit. But then it's far, but not like so far away. And
Yeah.
then the weather is known, at least from our point of view as Brits, for being kind of like English weather, but colder. So then we think like, oh, maybe if I'm going to go traveling, I'll go somewhere nice and warm like Spain.
That's fair. I think there are some misconceptions about the weather in Canada. In my province, I'm from British Columbia. It's on the Pacific coast. I'm from Vancouver, and we actually have a desert in my province. So there are rattlesnakes, there are cacti. We do have lots of different climates in Canada. In the wintertime, though, it does get a bit cold, but Vancouver is one of the warmer cities. So maybe about 5, 10 degrees on an average day in the winter.
Okay, that sounds very similar to most places in the UK.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So obviously, if you go far north or you go far east, you will encounter some cold temperatures, -20, -40. You know, it's interesting. I think the first time I was in minus 20 degrees, it actually didn't feel that cold.
Yeah.
I couldn't really tell the difference between minus 10, minus 20, even minus 30. I think it's more like the amount of time you can actually safely stay outside decreases the colder you get. But it actually doesn't feel, at least from my experience, that different. It doesn't feel that much colder.
Okay, so this is a lesson for everybody. If it's minus 10, then minus 20 will be fine. What's 10 degrees?
For a limited amount of time, sure, sure.
And you said you have a desert in your
We
province,
do.
your
We do,
county.
yes.
I always think about bears when I think about Canada. Are there many wild bears in your region too?
We do have bears. We do actually have quite a few bears. I have never encountered one in the wild,
Hmm.
but actually, that's not true. I
Okay.
have. I have encountered one in the wild, but I was at a safe distance. We have a saying, we have a few different types of bears. We have brown bears, black bears, grizzly bears.
Yeah.
They say if it's brown, lie down.
Okay.
If it's black, fight back. And if it's a grizzly bear, well, good luck.
Oh my God.
So
So
I
is that,
think,
go on.
yeah, I think the way you react to the bear depends on what type of bear it is. But thankfully, I've not been in that situation
You've
yet.
never had to lie down or fight back or run
Never,
away.
never, never. No. I've
Well,
just
thank God.
observed them from a safe distance. Yes.
So would you rather encounter a rattlesnake or a grizzly bear in the wild?
That's a good question. Um, I don't think I'd rather encounter any of them in the wild, to be honest.
A nice little puppy.
Yes, yes. Puppy might be better. A puppy might be better. And in the UK, what part of the UK are you from, Lewis?
So I'm from the north of England, near
Yeah.
Yorkshire,
Yes.
around Leeds, and it's what, like 4 hours to the north of London,
Hmm.
about
Hmm.
an hour to the north of Manchester.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the weather's cold. Of course, it's colder than in London, but it's not as cold as in Edinburgh and
Hmm.
Glasgow and in Scotland. But Leeds is a university city, an industrial city.
Hmm.
It's kind of been gentrified a little bit more recently. And around the canal, you've got lots of cool bars. You've got a nice vibe as well. So if you haven't visited, I definitely recommend it.
I've just been to London. I've been to London two times for just a couple days each. The first time I was in London, I had very, very bad food poisoning, so I actually
Oh.
couldn't enjoy it. But the second time was much better. But I've never been elsewhere in the UK. I'd actually love to visit Scotland. I think Scotland looks beautiful, especially the Highlands,
Mhm.
far, far in the north. Have you ever been to Scotland?
Yeah, I've been to Scotland a few times, and Edinburgh is absolutely beautiful. When you're walking around, it feels like you're around Hogwarts because all of the
Yes.
buildings are really old and cool, and you can tell that there's a lot of history there. I've never been right to the top of Scotland, to the Highlands, but I know that in Scotland, the nature is really, really impressive. And in England, it's a very, very populated country for the size of the country.
Yeah, it's
We have a
dense.
population, it's so densely populated
Yeah.
with like, I don't know, 55 million people in England only. And then in both Wales and Scotland, I believe the population's only like 5 million.
Hmm.
And when you look at the size, it's not a huge difference. Like, it's not so much smaller
Yeah,
than England is. So if you want nature, Scotland and Wales. If you want cities, England is the way to go.
for sure, for sure. If you want nature, I could also recommend Canada
Uh, and bears.
and bears and rattlesnakes. Yes.
And just going over this common thing, this viral pronunciation problem that people have is between bears and then the animal with wings that flies, and then what you drink maybe on a Friday night in a pub. And the
Uh-huh.
other one is what you have as a man if you don't shave. So, could you go over the difference in pronunciation between these four words?
So, bear. And the second word was something that
Something that flies that has
flies.
wings.
I'm drawing a blank.
It was
How would
a
you say it?
bird. So,
A
bear,
bird. Okay, a
bird.
bear, a bird, and a beer. Something you drink is a beard. Sorry,
Mhm.
a beer. And lastly, when you don't shave, you have a beard. So
Quite quick.
bear, bird, beer, beard.
Easy. There we go. See, sometimes even natives, we stumble over these words. So
It's
yeah,
true. It's true,
we have
especially if you have to use them back to back.
it's like blah, blah, blah. It's a tongue twister almost.
For
Awesome.
sure. For sure.
So yeah, that was bear, bird, beer, and beard. And on that note, let's move on. And you created English at the Ready. Before then, when and why did you start teaching English? What was the motivation when you decided to give it a shot?
Good question. Good question. So I originally started teaching English. Um, well, I'll go back even further. So I'm from Canada, but I studied at university in Austria. I
Okay.
actually studied music. So I wanted to become a musician. When I was in Austria, lots of my friends were not native English speakers, and they would always ask me, "What's the meaning of this? Can you correct my grammar? Can you help me with this English concept?" And I found I actually enjoyed helping them. One thing led to another. I
Mhm.
got back to Canada. I started teaching English. I also got my Cambridge CELTA certification, which is a certificate in English language teaching to adults. And after that, I started posting content and lessons online. I got lots of private students, and I started a membership platform, which is my English club, which I've
Mhm.
been doing for about a year now. And we have lots of amazing students in the club improving their English. And I also do teach some private lessons as well right now.
Right. So you wanted to be a musician and you were
Correct.
studying in Austria. It's
Yes.
a big change from English teaching.
It was a big change. It was a big change. I think music is something that's important to me. It's one of my hobbies. But what I found is that when you start to treat it as a career, you kind of lose the enjoyment, or at least I started to forget why I wanted to become a musician in the first place.
Mhm.
So right now, music is a hobby for me. I love playing piano. I love listening to music, but it's not my career. It's not my profession. And for now, I'm okay with that. That's something that 5 years ago I would have been surprised to hear, but now I'm perfectly fine with that. My priority is teaching English.
So you play the piano. Honestly, I'm terrible at playing any musical instrument. I remember being forced into learning to play the flute when I was like
Yeah.
4 or 5 years old, and I detested it. I hated it. And then since then, of course, I like listening to music. I like maybe singing in a karaoke and that kind of stuff, but I don't think I'm cut out to be a musician. I don't think I have the necessary skill set to be a musician. Uh, in your case, how old were you when you started playing the piano?
So I started when I was 4. I started when I was 4. Um, my parents wanted me to try a lot of different things, which I think was great. I'm very fortunate for that. And the piano kind of stuck with me. I love to play the piano. And I think that's something that you mentioned you didn't really find it that interesting to play the flute. You really have to enjoy it. You have to feel passion for it. Uh, Nobody can force you to do
Yeah.
it because it's something that you either enjoy or you don't enjoy. And if you don't enjoy it, you're not going to improve. You're not going to be motivated to keep practicing. Honestly, it's the same with learning a language too. I think it's important to make learning English enjoyable because if you're bored, if you're watching a movie you don't really like, you're
Mhm.
not going to pay attention, you're not going to actually be engaged with it, and you're not going to improve your English. So it's really important, at least in my experience, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but it's important to find things you enjoy doing because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to actually improve.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like, I think that's the most important thing, at least when it comes to learning a language. First, you need to be motivated and have a clear reason why. And this could be an intrinsic motivation that comes from inside, let's say, or it could be extrinsic, where you need to pass an exam in order to get a job, or you have a
Yeah,
job interview in English. And then this is a clear
mhm,
motivation from outside.
for
And this
sure.
is very motivating, but I think it helps if it's something you enjoy, which
Yeah.
is more intrinsic motivation, because then you know that you're going to want to do it. And if you
Mhm,
enjoy doing something, it's going to be more memorable
mhm.
and it'll spark your curiosity as well. Like the amount of times I'm going for a walk and I'll be thinking, like, how do I say that word in French?
Yes.
How could I express this in Italian? And if you're
Yeah.
curious because you enjoy that language, that culture, that history, uh, everything about it,
Yeah.
then it's more likely to stick with you.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree.
you're going to progress much faster
For
than
sure.
if you're being forced to do something.
Yeah. I think curiosity is probably the single or one of the single most important traits to have when you're learning anything. Because if you're not asking questions, if you're not asking why, uh, it's not going to provoke any sort of mental gymnastics or mental, I don't want to say gymnastics, but
Yeah.
it's not going to really stimulate any sort of intellectual thought. So you always have to be asking why, right? You have to be curious about the language you're learning or the skill you're learning. And obviously, there are, as you said, external factors that might compel you or force you to learn a language, like a job interview, moving to a new country. But it always helps if you can. You might have to search for it, but if you can find that motivation inside you internally, that's going to be a lot more powerful than somebody forcing you or somebody saying you have to do this.
No, 100%. And just on curiosity, one more thing that a lot of the content I post, maybe I'm describing what I'm doing, some actions, maybe I'm, for example, picking up a glass of water. And if you are thinking about this and trying to translate it, then you're going to be an independent learner and you could just be like, okay, what am I going to do now? I'm going to go for a walk. How
Mhm.
do I say I'm going to go for a walk in English? So if you're always asking yourself these questions, then you're able to become an independent learner. And of course, you can use podcast series, the content that we post. But if you're asking yourself these questions, you're much more likely to progress faster than if you're just waiting for something or someone to give you the information.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. And you mentioned that you are looking for a verb, for example, when you do an action, like picking up the glass of water. That's really powerful because I think it also trains your brain to think in English instead of simply looking for the word in your language and then thinking, okay, what's the translation? And then translating it. But it allows you to directly think in English. So you kind of avoid that step and you'll think a lot more quickly. You'll be able to speak without even thinking. And that's honestly the key to fluency.
Another interesting thing that's just come into my mind, it's just popped into
Popped
my
into, yeah.
mind, is the fact that I'm quite a slow speaker in general, whether I'm
Mhm.
speaking to my friends and family or with my students or I'm posting videos online. I'm naturally quite slow at maybe thinking and then getting words out of my mouth. Uh, you speak very slowly as well. So
Yes.
I'm interested. Is this the teacher, Michael, or is this just you being a slow speaker?
It depends. I mean, it depends. I think sometimes I speak more slowly, um, but if I'm agitated or if I'm stressed, then yeah, I'll speak more quickly. So what you see on my YouTube channel, what you see on my Instagram channel, I I speak like I speak like that in real life, but it just depends on the situation. And I'm sure in your case, there are instances where you speak in a more agitated way or in a quicker way as well.
Yeah, I think obviously if you get angry, if you get stressed, then
Yes.
tensions will rise and you might
Blood
change the
will
way that
start to
you
boil. Yes, yes, yes.
exactly, your blood will boil, tensions will rise, and you'll start kind of murmuring everything. This is something that I do. If I'm very tired and I'm speaking to my mom or dad, and I'm maybe not looking at them directly, I was like, "Oh yeah, mom, what are you doing later?" And
Yeah,
all of
yeah,
the words will just like form as one, and I'll
yeah.
start
Go
murmuring and not speaking
connect.
clearly. Of course, when we're recording, I'll try to speak slowly and clearly at the same time.
Absolutely. It's the same with me. It's the same with me.
Awesome. Now, changing the topic once again, Austria. I've
Yes.
never been. It's famous for classical music,
Mhm, mhm.
for the Alps, for schnitzels. Um, why did you choose Austria, and what was your experience like in a nutshell?
Yeah. So as you said, it's famous for classical music. That's the reason I chose it to study classical music. But I think it's a beautiful country. Uh, in some ways, it's very similar to Canada. There are mountains. There's no ocean. That's the one
Mhm,
thing that I did miss. There's no ocean in Austria, but Vienna, I actually studied in Salzburg, so smaller city.
mhm.
Vienna, Salzburg, they're beautiful cities. There's a lot of culture, lots going on. And what I really liked about Austria was how central it was. It was close to Italy, it was close to Germany, to France. So I could really travel a lot. I could take advantage of the relatively cheap flights in Europe if you compare to Canada. It's a
Mhm.
lot cheaper to fly within Europe. Um, and I met lots of people from lots of different countries, which was a good experience for me. I had quite a few international friends. And obviously, that is what prompted me to start teaching English too.
And being there, I imagine people spoke quite good English on average.
Yes, on average, Austrians do definitely speak English quite well. I learned German, so I learned German as well. One of the problems learning German is that if you speak to somebody in German and your German's not amazing, uh, they are likely to respond to you in English because obviously they would like to practice their English as well. Maybe they don't want to inconvenience you, but sometimes when that happens, you just have to respond back in German and say, "Hey, I want to practice my German."
Uh-huh.
But on the whole, Austrians are very friendly people. I had a great experience. I love the country, and I always think back to my time there fondly. So I would recommend going to Austria if you ever have the chance. Maybe that's to ski, maybe that's to visit Vienna for a couple days. Uh, Whatever it is, Austria is a beautiful place.
And how exactly did you learn German? Was it the, let's say, old-fashioned way of the school and stuff like that, or did
Yeah.
you do it more as an independent learner?
So I started learning back in Canada. I was, again, curious about German. I was curious about learning the language. And I did study the old-fashioned way, where I would basically just learn grammar rules. I would read a lot, and that got me to a certain point. But when I finally got to Austria, I started speaking. started actually speaking German. And that really skyrocketed my skills because now I can actually practice the language. And this is something I tell students all the time in my private lessons, in my club, and on Instagram as well, that you have to actually speak the language because a language is designed to be spoken.
Mhm.
It's not rocket science. If you don't speak, you won't improve. Even if you're not perfect, even if you're not speaking with completely correct grammar, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, you're learning a language, that's to be expected.
Mhm.
If you don't speak, you're not going to improve. So when I started speaking German, that was what really made a huge difference in my abilities.
And you said using a nice verb, which was that your German skyrocketed.
Yes,
Uh,
skyrocket.
to skyrocket is to rapidly increase or to grow, to go up. We use this verb quite a lot when speaking about figures and digits. And the opposite would be to plummet. So if something rises very, very quickly, it skyrockets or it soars. And if it drops or falls very, very quickly, it plummets. You could say there was a financial crisis and the stock prices plummeted. So they went down very, very quickly.
Yes, yes.
Cool. Well, I don't speak any German at all. Um, the only thing I know is one phrase, which I guess is kind of easy because it sounds a little bit like English, which is "Was ist das?" Which
Was
is
ist
what
das?
is
Was
that?
ist das? Yes, yes. Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because English at its core is a Germanic language. So all these small words, these fundamental words in English, like what, that, right? They're from Germanic origin. So I think I did watch this video a long time ago. Somebody experimented. They tried to speak English only using Germanic words,
Okay.
and it was possible. And then they tried to speak English only using words from Latin, and it wasn't possible. So these small words in English, these core fundamental words are Germanic in origin. They're from that family of languages.
Awesome. And there are a lot of videos online where people compare how languages sound and how
Oh,
they
yes.
look. And they'll usually be with French, Spanish, Italian, all of these Romance languages that look and sound very, very similar. And then you'll have German at the end. And it's obviously completely different. And it seems quite aggressive. Uh, would you agree that German, when it's spoken, can sound a little bit violent or
Mm,
aggressive or intense?
I would disagree with that. I don't, I mean, obviously any language can sound violent. If I were to yell, then English could sound violent or aggressive. I think German can sound very beautiful, especially German poetry. I think there are obviously historical reasons why we have maybe this stereotype that German uh, is a more aggressive or angry sounding language,
Uh-huh.
but I don't really agree with that. I think that German can sound very, very beautiful, very soft too, depending on who's speaking. It's also interesting. German, just like English, has lots of different accents. So the way they speak German in Austria is different from the way they speak German in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So I I know that's the stereotype. German's an aggressive language, but I would disagree with that. I would say that German can definitely be a very, very beautiful and nice sounding language as well. So it's a language. I think languages are generally what you make of them.
Exactly. No, no, 100% agree. I have to play devil's advocate and ask
Yes, to play
these
devil's advocate. Yes.
these tricky questions, but you navigated it very, very well. And one thing I'd like to pick up on your response was about accents. So,
Yes,
of course, in England, we have so many different accents depending on where you're from, and it can change in the space of like 10 miles, even.
for
Uh,
sure.
in the US and Canada, my impression is that there is a much less variety of
Yeah, it's true.
accents.
It's true.
Can you tell the difference between someone from Vancouver and someone from Toronto, for example?
A good question. Um, Not normally. I can, however, often tell the difference between a Canadian and an American.
Uh-huh.
Uh, for example, an American might say Toronto, Toronto, but in Canada we actually say Toronto, Toronto,
Okay, so there's like a
Toronto.
schwa.
Yeah, it's like combined, smushed together. Um, there are stereotypes that in Canada we say a at the end of sentences. I've not heard that. That might be more in Eastern Canada. We do have different accents in Canada, but it's more if you go to a more rural place,
Hmm.
somebody might have a bit of a stronger accent than in a big city. But you're right that the UK has far more accents than Canada or the US. And you said you can go, 10 miles to the next village and the accent will be completely different. It's because as we were talking about earlier, the population is densely packed into one place basically. So the US is a vast country, Canada is a vast country, sparsely populated. That's
Hmm.
the opposite of dense, sparse. And there are different accents, but you have to travel greater distances to actually see the difference.
Hmm. Which, for anyone who is trying to improve their Canadian English or American English as well, this is, I guess, a source of motivation as well, because it could make it easier to understand a lot more people if you're trying to improve this variety of English. Which, of course, if you're learning Irish English and then you go to England and then you go to Scotland, it's going to be a challenge, but I think a fun challenge to be able to spot the differences between the ways that people say certain things in one country and in another, and the slang words that we use as well. I always find this interesting with my Spanish because my Spanish is good. So I'm at the level where I can tell the difference between different accents and different words that people would use in the north of Spain, but not in the south of Spain.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
that's also one of the beauties of learning and improving your language skills.
For sure, for sure. And I would also add that there are differences in the US. You have a Boston accent, you have a New York accent, you have a Southern accent, but as you said, they're quite spread out.
And moving on again, I believe right now, are you in Hungary?
At the moment, yes, I'm traveling. I'll be in Croatia soon. I was recently in Vienna, back in Austria. Yes, yes. And I understand, are you in the UK?
Yeah, right now I'm at mum and dad's house. So I'm back home with the parents at the moment after having been in Spain over summer. Now I'm trying to get ahead with these videos, and then I'll be heading back to Brussels in a couple of weeks, back to sunny, beautiful Belgium. Yay!
Wonderful, wonderful. I've never been to Belgium. I'd love to visit, but I've never been. Why did you choose Belgium?
I, honestly, to tell you the truth, I didn't.
Belgium chose you.
More or less, in one way or another, yeah. No, my girlfriend got offered a good job in Brussels that she couldn't turn down. She couldn't reject it and say no to it. So when she moved to Brussels, I followed her soon after because I have the freedom of working wherever I want.
Yes,
So
very
there were
flexible.
exactly. I had no kind of get out of jail free card of being like, actually, I'd rather be by the beach in Spain.
Yes. And that's a benefit. That's a huge benefit for, or as an English teacher online, or teaching anything online. You do have quite a bit of flexibility um, for what you actually, or where you live, how you work, what your hours are. And for you, that's a perfect example. You just moved, you packed up, you were completely flexible.
Exactly. Flexibility is key,
I
100%.
agree. I agree.
But anyway, before we finish, tell me about Budapest, because I've never been either, and I know it's split up into Buda and Pest, but
Yes.
that's as far as my knowledge goes.
Yes. Yeah. So it's well, it was two cities combined. No, well, now they're combined. It's a beautiful place. I've been here for a little bit. I love to travel, and it's interesting to compare Vienna, Budapest. Vienna is more Austrian,
Hmm.
obviously. Budapest, to me at least personally, feels um, a bit. There's a different charm to it. There's a very different charm to it as well. Uh, I know you can probably get a pretty cheap flight from Brussels. It's a great place to visit for a weekend. Lots of things to see. The food is great. I love the food here. It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place. And that's one of the things I like about traveling because no city or no two cities are the same. Even cities close together, like I'm sure in the UK, London is different from, for example, Edinburgh or Glasgow, right? They're close together, but they have their own distinct culture. They have their own distinct character.
No, 100%. Like every city is different, in particular when it comes to old historic cities, because then they have these buildings that have been there for
For
decades or
sure.
centuries, and then you can tell that there is its own charm. Then I think with the smaller, newer cities, then
Mhm.
at least from my point of view, it feels like a lot of small cities in England are very similar because you have the same kind of shops that are always there.
Yeah.
And then
Okay. Yeah.
you have the same fast food restaurants as well.
Yes.
And it makes me sad to see this,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
it takes away from each individual unique part that the city used to have. Uh,
Right.
then
Right.
with London and Edinburgh, for example, this doesn't happen
Yeah.
because they are capitals at the end of the day
Mhm.
and very historical cities too.
Yeah. And you mentioned that history, those old buildings. Where I live in Vancouver, it's obviously a newer city. I think it was founded around 1886. So compared to London, that's yesterday.
Uh,
But what Vancouver has that most cities don't have is the nature. So you can be skiing and in the morning, and then in the afternoon, you can be on the beach. So really, we have beautiful nature. You can go whale watching, you can go hiking, you can go sailing, you can go swimming. That's something that is very special about Vancouver. And I actually haven't been anywhere else that has that same level of nature right next to the city. But of course, what I love about Europe is that historical character that Vancouver doesn't really have because it's a newer city.
well, you've convinced me to visit Canada as soon as possible. Hopefully, I can
Book the
start
next
saving
flight.
up and book a flight for next year
Yes,
and go skiing and maybe come across the bears.
some bears or rattlesnakes.
I'd prefer the bears, I think, but
Really,
I don't know. It's just the image of a rattlesnake and like hearing it like hissing. It's like, tss.
mm.
If it
At
was a
least you can
bear,
hear it. The
yeah.
bear could sneak up on you.
Bears seem cute, at least. I'm sure they're
They
not.
are cute.
They
They
seem
are
like it.
cute, especially when they're bear cubs. That's a good word, cub, right? A cub is a baby bear, a young bear, but you don't want to get in the way of a cub and its mother. Bad idea.
Yeah. Good luck, right?
Good luck.
And you mentioned the food in Hungary and
Yes.
Budapest. What is the most typical dish?
Uh, I'm sure you've probably heard of goulash. Goulash. Uh, it's this beef stew. I
Hmm.
do like goulash. Um, they have great coffee culture as well. I'm a big fan of coffee. Do you like coffee, Lewis?
Love it. I need 3 cups a day.
3 cups. Only 3 cups.
You have more than three.
Well, I tell myself I shouldn't, but sometimes I end up having 4 or 5. But There was a period where I was drinking 5 or 6 a day, and I stopped. I just completely stopped. I went cold turkey. It's a great idiom. I just completely quit. Then I started getting headaches. So that was a sign to me that I was drinking too much coffee.
Coffee is good for me.
Yes, yes. Well, or very bad. One of the two. But I do love coffee. I do like tea. I'm sure as a Brit, you know your tea better than I do.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, to be honest, I have both. When I was growing up and until the age of like 16, 17, I never really had any coffee or tea. So I'm a
Really?
little bit of an exception as a Brit because tea came into my life later. And I
You were a
still
late bloomer.
I'm a late bloomer when it comes to tea. And I
Yeah,
still prefer coffee because I feel it gives you that kick that you need to get started with your day.
for sure.
And I like a little espresso, which is maybe why I have like two espressos as soon as I wake up,
Mhm.
just down them as if it
You
was a
down them.
shot.
Yeah, you chug them.
And chug, chug, chug.
Yes, yes.
But then later on in the day, I might have a cup of tea to just chill out, maybe whilst teaching a class. I might have a cup of tea as well, and I'll encourage my students to grab a drink as well,
Yeah,
if it's a conversation class. And then you can have your cup of tea, have a little bit of a chat, and learn English. What could be
yeah,
better than that?
yeah. I think it's important to keep learning English relaxing. I don't think it should be a high pressure something that puts a lot of pressure on you, that makes you feel nervous, that makes you feel stressed. I think it should be as relaxed as possible. Because at the end of the day, English is just a language. There's nothing super, super special about that. It's just another way of communicating. So
Mhm.
I think that's great. Relaxing with tea, just having a nice conversation, improving your English. That's one of the best classroom environments in my opinion.
Perfect. So, on that note, I hope everybody has enjoyed this conversation, this interview, to find out a lot more about Michael, about Canada, about his piano playing, Austria, Budapest, and so on and so forth. And if you did enjoy it, but you'd like to review some of these expressions that we've used naturally throughout the conversation, then make yourself a cuppa, make yourself a cup of tea, go back to the beginning of the video and you can multitask, leave it on in the background, and keep improving your English. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Thank
Awesome.
you,
So,
Lewis, for having me. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. And for everybody watching, I hope you found this interview or conversation, rather. It wasn't really an interview. Hope you found this conversation helpful. I know that it was great for me, and I hope it was great for you too.
the feeling was mutual. And yeah, let us know in the comments. Do you prefer tea or coffee? Hmm.
Or
Thank you
both.
again. And we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and see you next time.